So I'm Robert Scoble, you know who I am. We're going to have a conversation a little bit about what the state of wearables is, where the panelist thinks the future is going. I wanted to start with Steve Mann because, let's be honest, this stuff is freaky. It still is freaky 30 years after you invented it, right? And how are we going to make wearable computers, particularly on the face, acceptable to the common everyday person?
Well, you know, one thing that I often wondered, and this comes down to really interesting moral and ethical question. You see, our governments and industry leaders hide their surveillance cameras inside these domes, like, you know, you see them around here, these dark domes that shroud the camera. It's kind of what I call conspicuous concealment. Sometimes they put them in really big domes that are bigger than necessary because they want you to see it and know it's there, but they don't want you to see which way it's looking or whether or not it's really there. So they put 100 of these mysterious dark domes and put cameras in only 10 of them. And so if we follow the example set forth by our governments and by our industry leaders, we would all be walking around with big spherical domes around our heads so that nobody could see which way we're looking, so no one would know if we're staring at them. So maybe... Okay. So yeah, so this question of valence, and does it freak people out? Because what freaked people out 30 years ago was that I had this camera, and it maybe turned down the mic a little because it's starting to feedback. We you know, have a camera, and people say, wow, we can't have a camera. And so I'd come into some place and they'd say, you know, there's no cameras allowed in here. And I'd walk in and I'd say, oh, there's a camera over there, there's one over there, there's one over there. And they'd say, oh, well, those are security cameras, those are not cameras. And I said, okay, well, if I take my seeing aid, which I built to help me see better, and instead turn it into a security camera by putting a transmitter on it and transmitting the image to the police station so that the police can now look out through my eyes and identify suspects, then that'll turn it into a security camera, and security cameras are not cameras. So then that suddenly makes my seeing aid not be a camera as long as I have a transmitter transmitting it to the police station.
Where did you do that?
I do that a lot of times. If somebody complains about it and says, I say it's a seeing aid to help me see better, and they say, oh, but it's really not allowed. And I say, okay, you got security cameras here. I'll just bring a transmitter and transmit it to the police station.
Did you have an incident with the American government? Did you have an incident about it with the American government?
I guess I am an incident by my mere existence. When I went to pick up my daughter's passport, you see, my wife and I had my daughter in the United States. I live in Canada, but I studied at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So we had our first child in the US, and so she has US citizenship, so I had to go to the US Embassy to pick up her passport. But I was simultaneously required to enter the US Embassy and forbidden from doing so, because in the US Embassy, electronic devices are not allowed. But I am, by my mere existence, an electronic device, so that makes me existential contraband by my mere existence. Now, as a seeing aid, it's fine, it's just helping me see, but the thing is, then I have to say, well, okay, I'll turn it into a security camera and put a transmitter to transmit to the police, and then it would be allowed. So you see, if we followed the example of our governments and industry leaders...
But how did it end? What happened in the end?
You can read my books. I wrote 2 books about this.
No, but how did you get the passport?
Well, they eventually decided that they were going to serve me out on the sidewalk because they were in a conundrum, they were in a log jam. They were required to serve me but forbidden at the same time. So when an infinite force meets an immovable object, something interesting happens. And so in this case, they brought their staff outside and they served me on the street.
So behind that question is usually when people see me wearing Google Glass out in the street, or some of these newer narrative clips or other computers or cameras on me, some of them get freaked out. Is there going to be any time in the near future something that shrinks down to a contact lens, i.e. in the next 18 months? I don't think it's that close.
Well, I built that contact lens system in 1999, some years ago, and yes, so I think it is close. The real question is, you see, we can already hide surveillance. Surveillance cameras could be hidden, but usually they put them in these domes to make them what I call maybe cameras. I call that conspicuous concealment. And I think What we're going to need in order to get through this problem is what I call conspicuous concealment of surveillance. So what we're going to need, instead of hiding it, because we can already hide cameras in little pinholes and everything, but the real social movement that's going to happen is we're going to have some kind of an eyeglass that could have a camera in it, and it's blatantly obvious. Like what we needed when we had that conference, I made those necklace cameras, and we made 500 of those dome cameras, and we gave them to all the attendees, and we only put cameras and transmitters in 4 of them, but nobody knew which ones. So that philosophical construct of surveillance, if we bring that over to surveillance, instead of hiding the camera or making it obvious, there's a special middle ground where the magic happens, and that's what I call conspicuous concealment. It's where you have an eyeglass that has a place for a camera, and it has a dark shroud over it so you can't see whether or not it has a camera, and we make millions of them, and then it becomes a new fashion accessory or fashion movement called the maybe camera.
So, Charles, you make this device, I think you're speaking about it later, right? About the breathometer? You're not speaking? Okay. So you make a breathometer that you breathe into and you study all sorts of things. Where do you think that part of wearables might be going? And it really isn't a wearable, is it? Do you consider a breathometer a wearable?
That's a great point, Robert. So essentially what breathometer is, we created the world's first smartphone breathalyzer. I have it in my pocket, actually. And for some of you that have seen the famous TV show Shark Tank, we were on it and made our debut then. We're shipping, we're live. You can order us today on the site. We've sold millions of dollars of it already. But essentially right now what we're focusing on is basically the breath print is what we refer to it as. We can lock onto a particular gas and correlate it to a particular condition. So we started off with something simple, which everyone can relate to, which is alcohol, ethanol. We're now moving into things like metabolic rate, asthma, diabetes, things of that nature. So we're truly a digital health company. But to address the question that you asked, is are we truly a wearable company? For now, currently we're, I would say, referred to as EDC, an everyday carry. We coined the term carryable, but we're quickly moving towards a wearable product. And the whole idea is to be integrated to what I believe is going to be a super set of sensors. And I think Samsung's kind of nailing it, along with the other wearable companies, but it's your wrist, which is a very, very vital, important piece of real estate. But if you're going to fight for that real estate, you got to have an immense amount of value. And I think as a breathalyzer product, it's not for everybody. I think it's inherent and valuable for particular cases, but when you can actually have something that's modular, whether it's a super set of sensors on a modular phone like the Moto X, or on a wrist type smartwatch, or maybe even on, say, your smart glasses, whatever the superset or the quote-unquote form factor is, if it's modular in nature, I think that is truly the apex. But we're getting there, and we just started, so.
Very cool. Let's talk about like the Oculus Rift and and your product, Yobi, and the Meta. There's a gradation of on-the-face wearable computers, right? The Google Glass is almost a notification computer, like you were explaining. It's a little screen up here that you have to look at, and it shows you maybe tweets or shows you information. All the way up to the Oculus Rift is a full-on virtual computer. You can't see the real world at all, and it's very compelling in the virtual world. The Meta is halfway. It has 2 screens that shows virtual information on top of the real world. Where do you think this gradation is going to fit?
So,
and where do you think the use cases are going to show up for each of these, I guess?
let me just add that from our design point of view, our design construct was entertainment. Play any game that exists today, watch any movie that exists today, and then add some very basic APIs that allow you to extend that gaming environment and that entertainment environment. That was the design construct. Number 2 is that you had to be willing to put it on your head. So that's why it's a headphone. When people first see the product, they just put it on. It's a headphone. They don't think about our product as a head-mounted display system. So that was an important design construct. So we had to make it lightweight, so we're now approaching 12 ounces, which is actually the Beats is actually 13 ounces. So we're going to approach the same weight as a large Beats headphone. I think the Continuum is at different purposes, right? So there is a different purpose for a full function computing device, which is a glanceable, because you might want to go and, like I have the version of Google Glass that actually has a lens. So now I can actually interact with people. A lot of the things that I've seen it done for is telemedicine. You know, with regards to the Oculus Rift. The Oculus Rift, as far as I'm concerned, and they may not agree with this, is a gaming system, virtual reality game system.
Well, it's being adopted for other things, like looking around at imagery of different types, right? Which goes beyond gaming. But that's the first time I saw it, and that's that image that this is an entertainment system stuck with me.
So I just want to add, all right, so as of today, we have pre-sold almost 17,000 units of our device. 10,000 of those units are to be used for drone controllers. So those drone controllers are going to be used by a manufacturer of drones, civilian drones. I just wanted to make sure. Civilian drones, and we never even thought about that use case, to be honest. When we said, oh, that's interesting, that's an interesting use case. It is not going to be, so they're building special purpose software to integrate and how to control your drones, your drone system. So the use cases are actually beyond our own imagination. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's a monitor with sensors that's bidirectional. What people will do with it, we actually don't know.
I want to take off from there and put a word of caution and skepticism in all of this. I am a true believer in the proliferation of sensors and wearables, but I also feel that we're so unbelievably early in this. You know, we have Steve, who's been inventing this for the last 30 years. It's now starting to happen. But we got to get a degree of reality here, which is that last year, with all of this buzz and enthusiasm, there's about $500 million invested in this sector worldwide. And that represents about 1% of the total venture capital investment last year. So it's happening, it's interesting, it's going to be a different kind of funding mechanism. What you're seeing here, by the way, is that several of these companies that have been mentioned have already raised money in different than typical venture capital methods. Kickstarter has become essentially the VC of choice for many wearable or sensor-oriented companies. Glyph raised money that way, Oculus Rift raised money that way. The only problem is the guys who backed Oculus Rift and gave them $2.4 million, they got a lovely t-shirt. The other guys who actually built Oculus, they got rich. Okay, and so where's the justice in that? Where reality is that basically people went ahead, gave real money, good money, to back an important project, and then this project hits a huge home run, right? $2 billion return on original $2 million. He raised $1.5 million. You got a guy here just walked in, Dror Sharon, who has a company called Consumer Physics, an Israeli company, which literally in 15 days has become in the top 15 of all time on Kickstarter, has raised 1.3 million, the best Israeli company ever on Kickstarter. But what's interesting about what Dror did is he raised the money on Kickstarter in order to launch the product to get consumer buy-in, but at the same time, he let people do equity crowdfunding on our crowd. So that what's happening is that the consumer says, wait a minute, I want to get this product early. I want to have it and play with it. That's great. But I really want to buy his equity. Okay, I want to give him, you know, $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, and when he sells the thing for $2 billion, God willing, okay, I don't know if you'll accept that price or not, but no, okay, so it's gonna get more than Oculus. But the reality is that the funding model is changing, and you're going to have companies that will both use Kickstarter as sort of the consumer, filter, as well as do equity crowdfunding on sites like Our Crowd or AngelList or Circle Up or whatnot. But there's one other comment I wanted to make about Israel's role in this whole thing. I think that what Israel is going to do here is going to be huge. And the reasons why Israel is going to be so important, number one, is that a lot of this stuff, especially sensor technology and vision, has, as you saw here with Glyph, deep military roots. The skills necessary to make a lot of this stuff happen are in this room, and are certainly in the units that are all over this country. When we're talking hardware, Israel rocks. We're talking embedded electronics, Israel rocks. We're talking communication and vision system, Israel rocks. When you talk about essentially multidisciplinary systems that involve hardware, vision, communication, medicine, there's no one who can compete with us, with all due respect. And so I think that what you're going to see is a lot of very interesting companies coming out of Israel in this area.
Well, that's why I'm here. Go ahead.
The Oculus Rift is a very interesting thing. I actually don't understand it because it's a device that disconnects you from your reality. You're going to a different reality. You have to prearrange the place you are standing in because you can't move. If you move, you fall because you don't know where you're going to. So you have a virtual reality and you cannot disconnect from your reality, so you have to stand in the same place. What we are seeing with the Google Glass or all the augmented reality devices is that we are adding another layer of content, context, information on our day-to-day reality. We like our reality is good. We want to have more on our reality and not replace it with different reality. And I don't know what the usage they're going to do except of gaming and presentations in all kind of conferences, but it's not going to be a mass device. On the other hand, yeah, we are only in the beginning of the augmented reality devices, and the augmented reality devices based on context will be huge. We are only warming up right now.
And I'm trying to figure out how to bring you into the conversation.
Actually, it's understandable because Tillett is not a wearable company, but it is an IoT company, and I wanted to kind of extend what was said about the early stages. Wearable as a vertical application in IoT is great. I mean, it's sensors transmitting data. We need to make sense of the data. We need to store the data. We need to do all that stuff. And we as Tillett, we have a very good broad view of, let's say, the issues in IoT and the struggles it has in really converging into something, very big. One of the issues I think that we need to point out is the issue of how to make applications talk to each other, because this is something we see all the time. I mean, at the end of the day, you create this wonderful wearable device. It collects data off your body or off your ambient environment in the situation you're in, and you send it away to a dedicated proprietary server. You process that data, but you rarely share it with other applications. And I don't know how many of you saw the Tillett video or the television of IoT, where things actually talk to each other. So your car can talk to your connected car can talk to your smart home, and it can talk to a wearable device on you that predicts, in the contextual sense, where you are, where you're going, are you approaching, did you cross the geofence, what is the home supposed to do now? Is it supposed to heat up? Is it supposed to, the air conditioner supposed to turn on, and so on. And for this to really happen, this vision to really materialize, we need applications to talk to each other. And this is kind of a very big barrier at this point, beyond the freakiness factor and the factors and people being not completely comfortable with wearing things on themselves that kind of send out information on them. It's how to make everything click together, how to make everything talk to each other. And this is something that will need standardization.
There will need to be a proposed standard at least on how a biosensor that's reading blood pressure should transmit data. The security mechanisms around that, security mechanisms around storing the data, what can be analyzed, how the data can be approached by external applications, and so on. This standard could be a real standard,
or it could be a de facto standard. Let's say some juggernaut does this really
complete ecosystem of applications, and that could work too. But I think that until this starts to happen, this will never really go big, because okay, you'll have this cool device like the Oculus, like the but at the end it will be an island universe. It will be just that device.
So, and I'm going to get you back in this, Steve. If I have a Meta on and I'm walking down the street, you make TELUS these parking sensors, right?
We're a completely horizontal company in IoT. We address the whole value chain, apart from the.
You make all these things that.
No, we don't make them. We enable them. We make the cellular modules in them.
Yeah, because your stand has a whole bunch of little modules.
No, but these are our customers actually. So a wearable company could easily be our customer, and we can provide it with the cellular connectivity. We can provide it with all the management tools for deployment. We can provide it with the cellular modules themselves. We can provide it with SIM cards, embedded SIM cards. We can provide it with AEP and everything like that. But we don't make the actual application.
So where I was going with that, back in the 1980s, Apple showed us a vision of a tablet PC in a video, sort of like the video you're playing over at your stand. And it took almost 20 years for the iPad to come out, right? We had the Newton, which didn't quite get there. It wasn't quite what people wanted. And then the Palm Pilot came out, then the iPad came out 10 years later after that. Are we overhyping this world? And if we are, should we back up and say, well, Google Glass should be only for vertical markets, like a surgeon using it in a surgery, or a cop using it to take pictures of suspects or something like that? Should we back up and not overhype the potential of this new world that we're heading toward?
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems, is there's too much hype in the industry, kind of like AI, artificial intelligence, and the AI winters. I kind of predict a wearable computing winter if we have too much hype like this, because there's too much pushing of this idea. One of the things that I still come back to, that basic question: if you're going to sell eyeglasses, the eyeglasses have to help people see better. If it can't do that, why? So why have this little TV screen up in your eyeglasses to look up and see the weather or something, if it can't actually help you see better in the true sense? Oculus Rift is a blindfold. Anything that's a blindfold that you can't see with, it covers up your eyes. Why do that? You can have the same benefit. The Meta gives you everything the Rift has, but it allows you to also see, and it can see. So there's two things. You put this eyeglass on, it should allow you to see, and it should also be able to see. And if it becomes an ITAR device, then every single piece of eyeglass that everybody's going to wear has to become an ITAR device, and ITAR has to change, with all due respect to your earlier comment of leaving the camera out.
Yeah, I guess if I was working at Oculus, I would say, well, if you go to a movie theater, you want it to be dark, and you want to consume the movie in a dark space where you don't see a real world behind
the Meta
the movie.
shade, the Meta auto darkening. Would you rather have a blindfold or an auto darkening helmet? So when you're wearing the Meta, let's say you weld something, you strike up the arc, it darkens for you to the right level, shade 12. And so if you want it to darken, yes, you can darken it, but you can also lighten it. Why have a black shade, a shade infinity, always in your helmet? Why not have the right shade for the right job, which might be infinity at some points in time, but it might also be 0 or shade 12 or whatever.
Yeah. We only have, I think, 3 minutes left. Is there something, and maybe just go point by point, person by person, what's exciting you? What should we be paying attention as an industry to? And just keep it real brief.
I just wanted to make another sort of, again, cautionary comment. I don't want to be negative, but I don't know how many people realize how many different campaigns have raised over $1 million for a technology product on Kickstarter. What do you think?
15?
It's actually 20. Okay, there have been 20 total campaigns for technology products that have raised over $1 million on Kickstarter. You got one here, we've talked about Oculus, you've now got, you know, Scio out here, the Israeli company. Okay, Meta raised a couple $100,000, you know, and Kickstarter reached beyond their goal. But, excuse me? Yeah, well, you know, you got things like Ouya, which raised $8 million, and Pebble raised the still all-time champion $10 million. But we're talking about a business, okay, here in terms of this sort of golden age of hardware. Let's spread it out a little bit, you know, beyond just the wearable and Internet of Things and sensors and breathalyzers. It's exciting, it's interesting, it's got investors sort of, you know, their interest is peaked, but it's early days. And we don't know what people are like. I think some of the things that I saw scare me and make me feel creeped out. I thought, and I love Intel, I'm a huge supporter and fan. When I see that little baby wired up, I get sick. I want to puke. Okay, in other words, yes, I want to fight crib death and SIDS and all that, but the notion that I'm going to go wire my baby and you know, attach an Edison to him, maybe I'm just an old guy. Okay, but that freaks me out. That doesn't resonate with me. And I think that we've definitely got to be careful in this industry to find those applications like breath, to find the applications like, you know, drone controllers. If someone's going to put up 10,000 drones, then I guess the glyph is the way to control it, okay? But you got to find those applications that make sense. Things like Scio, which are, you know, going to basically investigate, you know, the nature of matter. That makes sense. And Meta, you know, which I think will end up finding vertical applications, okay, that will make a lot of sense. I don't see everybody walking around with glasses anytime in the next year or 2 or 3. I don't see it, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's my feeling.
You know, I wish we had another half an hour, because there is something to the generational rift here. When I show Google Glass to a 17-year-old, they say, "This is my future." I don't hear many people who are in my age range thinking that this is a future that they want to be a part of. And that is going to be a problem for our industry. But the Apple II was that way. When I got an Apple II and I was in junior high, the old people in my community go, "Why do I want a personal computer?" Including Steve Wozniak's own bosses. He wanted to stay at HP. And HP said, "No, nobody's going to buy a personal computer," right? And look at how big the industry is now, right?
How many glasses do you think will be sold in 2 years?
You know, there are crazy people that take showers with their Google Glass.
I'm going to swim in the Dead Sea with mine.
What you should do is ask the audience, you know, whether they think that in 2 years from now, will there be 1 million glasses sold?
Yeah.
Will there be in 2 years from now? How many, I'm going to say it's 1 million, 10 million, or 50 million glasses. Okay, of all kinds, Google, Meta, Glyph, everything. How many people think in 2 years from now 1 million glasses will be sold? Raise your hands.
I think.
How many think that will be 10 million? And how many think it'll be 50 million? Okay.
Let me ask the question a different way. How many more headsets will be bought next year? Headsets, just regular audio headsets. So this year, by the way, in the United States alone, we have the headset market, which I know the real data, 65 million sold. Headsets.
Headphones were at...
By the way, you can do it. Because
I want to ask it in a different way. How many more screens are going to be sold in the next year? We are going to have screens everywhere. We are going to have hot screens on our cars. We are going to have screens on our hands. We are going to have screens everywhere. So this is the real question. It's not the hardware, the installment. It's the screens that we can get the information. And I totally agree with you, John, that they have to rebrand the Kickstarter and crowdfunding to sucker funding. because these suckers don't get any equity in the companies they fund. So I agree with you.
So
We have to
we're out of time, so let's give Steve the last point and keep it brief, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I want to rephrase that question. How much eyewear will be sold next year? Every single kind of eyewear. Because I think that, again, I keep repeating the same thing over and over again. If it can't help you see better, what good is it? So it's got to just replace traditional eyeglasses. Lots of people buy eyeglasses because it helps them see better. If it's bright outside, you put on some dark glasses to see better. If I see how much, like, raise your hands if you're wearing eyeglasses now of any kind. Raise your hands if you think you might buy eyeglasses in the future of any kind. You're going to a beach, it's too bright, can't see well, you know, whatever. So I think that's really where the market is. If it can't help you see better, what good is it? So that's
Well,
really...
you know, the Oakley Airwave goggle, I have a pair and I used them while skiing. It doesn't help you see better. In fact, you really don't want to use the computer when you're skiing because you need to pay attention to the bumps. But it really is nice when you're at the top of the hill trying to decide on the paths you're going to go because you can see the map and it knows where you're aiming your head and you can see where your kids are so you can ski toward your kids or chat with them right in the glass. It's really a lot of fun. And then at the end of the run, you can see how fast you went and some other stats like how much your jump time was. And I think that's a lot of fun. It's not the full-on virtual world that Meta is going to bring to us.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be. The thing is, Meta can get out of the way when it doesn't need to be. Basically, you've got a mediated world. It's not a virtual world, it's an augmediated world. It's a full-on augmediated world, the best of both worlds. It can completely get out of the way and give you complete unobstructed vision, but it can also make things clearer. So when you're on the ski slope and the contrast is poor, it can kind of enhance the contrast using HDR in real time so you don't get snow blindness, so you can actually see little bumps that you could not otherwise see, and that might save your life.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I wish we had more time, but we got to keep the show rolling. So thank you so much.